Good morning. Isn't it great to be welcomed by the voices of angels when we get together to worship on Sunday morning? Thank you, choir. Welcome. I'm Reverend Victoria Ingram. I'm delighted to see you here with this congregation of the First Unitarian Church of Hamilton on a beautiful Sunday at the end of November, which is almost hard to believe, isn't it? We are a community that opens our hearts and hands and minds to creating a beloved place where all are welcome. We meet on territory that is part of the historic lands of the Six Nations, and we are stewards of that property now, understanding that we have a link to the past and a responsibility to the future, which we seek to honor in all we do. This morning, we are gathering together in this community that nurtures one another, serves the community, and inspires action to heal the world, to celebrate and to think about World AIDS Day, which happens on Tuesday, December 1st. On that day, we pause for a time of reflection. It's time to think about the ways in which our understanding and treatment of HIV/AIDS has changed in the 40-some years that the virus has been with us. It's time to remember all the things that have been achieved in terms of treatment and prevention, and to continue to remember as well what remains to be done to eradicate this illness in Canada and around the world. Of course, it's also a time for remembering those around the world who have died from AIDS, as well as those who live on in the face of loss and illness, infection, and suffering. This year's theme for World AIDS Day is Global Solidarity, Shared Responsibility. And in Canada, it is also Aboriginal AIDS Awareness Week coming up in front of us. Of course, this year, World AIDS Day comes in the midst of another global epidemic, COVID-19, and the response to both of these pandemics is linked. Great strides in education and disease management have changed the face of AIDS. However, responding to the current surge of the coronavirus threatens access to HIV prevention, testing, and treatment. A resurgence of HIV would place an even greater stress on our current public health response to COVID. Our guests today are going to help us reflect on World AIDS Day by speaking from their work, which is involved in eradicating AIDS and supporting those with the virus and helping to educate and prevent. They are Ruth Ann Seaburn, who is the Grandmother's Campaign Officer for the Stephen Lewis Foundation, which you will remember is the parent organization of the Blooms for Africa group, which is affiliated with our congregation. Ask Ruth Ann to just wave so you'll know which person she is. Two other Blooms members are with us today as well. Kathy Thomas and Doreen Knoll are going to be readers as a part of our service. And the other person that's with us today to help us understand things on the local level is Tim McClement. Tim, if you'll just give us a little wave there, we'll know who you are. He's the executive director of the Hamilton AIDS Network, and he's going to talk about local efforts to support those facing HIV/AIDS here in Hamilton and the local area. This morning, I'm going to invite Kathy Thomas to start us out with our call to worship. Kathy?
My first reading is anonymous. I don't know who wrote it. It came from a lawn sign that somebody put up at the beginning of this pandemic. But I think it kind of fits with the themes that we're talking about today. And then the whole world walked inside and shut their doors and said, "We will stop it all, everything, to protect our weaker ones, our sicker ones, our older ones. And nothing in the history of humankind ever felt more like love than this."
Thank you, Kathy. We light our chalice when we gather together as a symbol of the Spirit at the heart of our faith, that fire of commitment. And this morning I'm going to light our chalice. It's behind me. I'm going to ask you to join with me in saying our unison chalice lighting words. May this flame be our light of friendship and love. And now if you will also join your voices in singing with hymn number 6, Just as Long as I Have Breath.
Number 6, Just as Long as I Have Breath. Just as long as I have breath, I must answer yes to life. Though with pain I made my way, still with hope I meet each day. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to life. Just as long as vision lasts, I must answer yes to truth. In my dream and in my dark, always that elusive spark. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to truth. Just as long as my heart beats, I must answer yes to love. Disappointment pierced me through, still I kept on loving you. If they ask what I did best, tell them I said yes to love.
Our story this morning is written by Dr. Wintera Cunningham of the Women's Hospital in Houston, Texas. And Dr. Cunningham spent 3 months in Botswana, and following this time, she wrote this book to help dispel the stigma and myths that are sometimes attached to children living with HIV in Africa. And it's called Impo's Legacy of Hope. Listen up, you guys. It's halftime. The score is tied at 2. You've all worked hard, and I know we can win this thing. Tobago, Shepo, Kahiso, I want you to get the ball to Impo so he can work his magic, the coach said. Impo, I want you to do your thing and score. Remember, ignore the screaming crowds. Concentrate and focus, and you can do it. On 1, 2, 3, let's win, the coach said. Impo is nervous as he remembers his coach telling him to work his magic. The stadium is loud with fans of both teams cheering their team on. Impo is afraid he might not hear the whistle when the ref blows it to start the second half. It's amazing, the Lions score again, said the announcer. But wait, with only minutes left to play, the Simbas score again. The big championship game is all tied up at 3-3, the announcer shouts as the crowd erupts with excitement. Impo sees the ball and makes a run for it. Here he comes, the announcer exclaims. The 4 top players from Simba's team are on Impo's heels, but he looks determined. Run, Impo, run! The crowd is chanting. Can he do it? It's all up to Impo now, the excited announcer shouts. The goalie missed. He tried his best, but no one could have stopped that kick from Impo, the announcer shouts. The Lions win. The Lions win the big championship, the announcer exclaims over the roar of the crowd. Impo saves the day and is a hero. What a game, what a win, said the announcer. Impo, I'm so proud of you. What will you do to celebrate, the coach asks. I think I'll invite my teammates for ice cream. Wow, this is the best day of my life, says Shepo. Me too, says Kashigo. Thanks to Impo, this is a day I will never forget, says Tobogo. Thanks, Impo smiled gratefully. Congratulations, boys. Your ice cream cones are on us today. Thanks, Mr. and Mrs. Sagal. The boys cheered. Let's go to the park. Impo, how did you get to be such a great soccer player? You're the best player on the team, Kahiso says. I wasn't always a good player. I was never big and strong like I am now. I used to be sick all the time, and I took a lot of medicine. I never thought I would be able to do or be anything when I grew up. I had no hope for my life. I remember asking my grandmother when I was about 5 years old, why did I have to take so much medicine? She said it was because the medicine would make me feel better. When I was about 7, I began asking about my mom and dad, and I wanted to know what happened to them. My grandmother told me that they died, and I asked why. She said that they both had HIV, which made them very sick. She also told me that when my mom gave birth to me, she passed on the disease to me. I didn't quite understand until my grandmother explained more. I then realized I too had HIV. I asked her if I would die like my parents did. She said, no, not if I took my medicine every day like I'm supposed to. I had no idea that you had HIV. I mean, you don't even look like it. You're not skinny or anything, Kashigo said. Well, most people with HIV who take their medicine don't look sick. They look normal, like everyone else. You wouldn't even be able to spot them in a crowd, Impo said. Yes, my mom works at the hospital, said Toshibo. She said that a lot of patients that were really sick before are healthy now, even though they still have HIV. My mom said that was because they have been taking their medicine. Tobogo asks, are we really supposed to be talking about this stuff? I've heard a lot of bad stuff about AIDS. We could get into lots of trouble talking about AIDS because, you know, if you have AIDS, it means you have been a bad person and that you've been doing things that you're not supposed to do. First of all, I don't have AIDS. I have HIV. There's a big difference between HIV and AIDS. Many people use those two words like they mean the same thing, but they don't. Just because a person has HIV does not mean that they will have AIDS too. AIDS is the result of HIV, meaning that I could develop AIDS if I don't take my medicine and take care of myself, Impo says firmly. Having HIV or AIDS doesn't make you a bad person, and it doesn't mean that you've done something bad to get it. Look at me. I was just born, and I got it. Being born is a good thing. You were born too, or else you wouldn't be here today, and we wouldn't have won the championship. Oh, I get it. HIV/AIDS is more like having a bad cold or the flu. Having it doesn't make you a bad person. It's just an illness, Tobogo shouts. It seems like HIV is kind of hard to get. All of the ways I thought you could get it turned out not to be true. I now know that you can't get HIV from touching someone or shaking someone's hand, Kashigo said with surprise. Don't forget that Impo said you cannot get HIV from sharing a room with someone who has HIV or from visiting someone who's HIV, Toshipo said with a smile. Oh yeah, so Impo, how can you get HIV? Kashigo asks. My family is nice and I'll never get HIV, Toshibo interrupts, saying with confidence. Don't say that, Toshibo. It can happen to anyone. HIV doesn't look for certain people to infect. One way to help stop HIV from spreading is to teach someone else about it. Okay, this is so cool for you to tell us all this info. You really know a lot about HIV, and now we do too, Toshibo said. Yeah, thanks for dropping some knowledge on us, Impo, added Tobogo. No problem, guys. We are best friends, and that's what friends are for. Let's check out the swings before we go home, Impo suggests. I'll see you guys at school on Monday, Impo says, barely able to speak. They're hugging him so hard. And that's the end of our story for today.
Thank you, Tim. This time in our service, we take a few moments to relax into body, mind, and spirit. And I invite you to get comfortable as we prepare for a time of contemplation and meditation prayer. Kathy Thomas is going to read our meditation words for contemplation this morning. So, Kathy?
Hello. I'm going to read a poem by Kitty O'Meara. She wrote at the beginning of this pandemic. And the people stayed home and they read books, and they listened, and they rested, and they exercised, and they made art, and they played games, and they learned new ways of being, and were still, and listened more deeply. Some meditated, some prayed, some danced, and some met their shadows, and the people began to think differently, and the people healed. And in the absence of people living in ignorant, dangerous, mindless, and heartless ways, the earth began to heal. And when the danger passed and the people joined together again, they grieved their losses and they made new choices, and they dreamed new images and created new ways to live and heal the earth fully as they had been healed.
I am peace. I am love. I am light. You are peace. You are love. You are light. We are peace. We are love. We are light. I am peace. I am love. I am light. You are peace. You are love. You are light. We are peace. We are love. We are light. I am peace. I am love. I am light. You are peace. You are love. You are light. We are peace. We are love. We are light.
Speaking first today will be Tim McClement from the AIDS Network.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. For us at the AIDS Network, World AIDS Day is very important. It's a time to reflect and to memorialize, and a time to reaffirm our commitment to our mission to respond to the impact of HIV in Hamilton, Halton, Haldimand, Norfolk, and Brant, and time to recommit to our vision of a world without new infections and a long and healthy life for people living with, affected by, and vulnerable to HIV. This year, UNAIDS has declared the theme of World AIDS Day is global solidarity, shared responsibility. The COVID-19 epidemic has drawn the world's attention and brought into focus many truths that are familiar to those of us in the HIV movement. We've been fighting these challenges and fighting for change for nearly 40 years. The interconnected nature of health and social determinants of health are being clearly demonstrated by the COVID-19 pandemic as communities facing marginalization, stigma, barriers, and insecure access to the necessities of life are disproportionately impacted by this new public health crisis. COVID-19 has also demonstrated that to achieve a goal of healthy communities, it is all or nothing, and our response cannot work if it does not prioritize everyone in our communities, especially our most vulnerable. So for us at the AIDS Network, this past year has been obviously very challenging, as it has been for everybody. So the most important thing that was impacted by what started in March with our lockdowns and restrictions was the provision of space, which is very important to us at the AIDS Network for our constituencies. So we provide a safe space, a confidential space for people to gather and to share with each other. And that has been restricted since March. We cannot operate the programs we used to in that space right now. So we've had to repivot and redirect some things, which we've been able to do. But we are concerned about what the impact will be over the longer term as this goes into the next year of the HIV transmission rate and hepatitis C transmission rate. And not having a space where people can gather and connect and restore means they're perhaps left more vulnerable in whatever situation they may be in, whether it's insecure housing or living outside in encampments or trying to get treatment. All of these factors will play into what we are concerned could be rising infection rates. So we will see where that goes in the coming months and years. But we've been able to work, especially with partners in the community. And I just want to acknowledge some, because I know some of them have been working too with this organization. So the Ham Smart Group, Keeping Six, Grenfell Ministries, the SWAP Group, and also a group that we work with in Halton called the Halton Equity Diversity Roundtable. So through these connections and partnerships, we've been able to help reinforce kind of what's going on out in the community and repivot some of our services so that they're being provided in other places. Many of it is outside, and many of our services right now in terms of prevention and harm reduction are provided by mobile outreach van. So we've been able to do that in Hamilton for many years, and we were able to also join the teams that were doing that work during the day as our service runs in the evening and covers the entire city of Hamilton and throughout all of the communities. And we just launched, right when the pandemic started, we launched a new van program, mobile outreach, to serve Haldimand, Norfolk, and Brant, which is communities we've been serving for quite some time. So this has been a great and quite successful, we're pleased to see initiative in that area that really needs it. So it's brought a new dimension too to kind of the work we can do by reaching out to people where they're at, as opposed to going into institutions or where they might be facing other barriers. So we've been doing that, and very, very grateful for the support we receive from partners that work with us, or just from the public, and people who need to access those services. So we're going to continue doing that as we get into the next year, and hopefully we will be able to continue keeping people safe, and that's the most important thing, is to keep people safe. so that the impact of HIV, whether it's someone who is positive or someone who isn't, does not continue to deteriorate and get worse. So that's what we're basically concerned about. So as AIDS has stated in their annual update, so during a pandemic, no one is safe until everybody is safe. Leaving people behind is not an option if we are to succeed. Eliminating stigma and discrimination and putting people at the center and grounding responses in human rights and gender responsive approaches are key to ending the colliding pandemics of HIV and COVID-19. So let's take this year, where we must remain apart, to renew our commitment to fighting for the health of all and addressing inequities that leave some of our friends and neighbors disproportionately impacted and at greater risk of infection. So thinking globally means acting locally too, very much so, and addressing those issues right here. So let's renew our fight for the rights and dignity of people living with HIV by advocating for reform of outdated laws and by spreading the word that achieving an undetectable viral load means that a person living with HIV can no longer transmit the virus to sexual partners. Let us continue to fight for barrier-free access to modern prevention options like PrEP for people who are at higher risk of contracting HIV. Let's keep fighting for more and better harm reduction programs and services for those facing this third devastating epidemic colliding with COVID-19 and HIV, and that's the opioid overdose crisis that has cost thousands of lives in Canada and continues to cost more and more lives every month, and many worldwide. In closing, just to also emphasize too that our approach, we feel, must be holistic and include fighting to end racism, and particularly anti-Black and anti-Indigenous racism, homophobia, transphobia, gender-based inequality, and all stigma and inequities in our community. Let us continue to fight systemic injustice that leaves marginalized populations more vulnerable to these and other poor health outcomes. So in closing, I'll just mention another quote from the UN World AIDS Day update. So now is the moment for bold leadership for equal societies, the right to health for all, and a robust and equitable global recovery. This World AIDS Day, join us in calling on countries to step up their efforts to achieve healthier societies. This World AIDS Day, let us demand global solidarity and shared responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. Let's join together in singing hymn 314. We are children of the earth.
314, we are children of the earth. We are children of the earth, children of the earth, and we love our Mother Earth, love our Mother Earth.
now I'd like to turn it over to Ruth Ann Seaburn of the Stephen Lewis Foundation. Ruth Ann?
Thank you so much. I'm just going to share my screen 1 minute. So thank you so much for inviting me here and giving me this time to share and speak. I'm sure many of you know about the Stephen Lewis Foundation and the work that we do. But I'm just going to start off by giving a quick overview of our model and how we work. So since 2003, the SLF has funded over 1,800 initiatives and has partnered with 325 community-based organizations across 15 sub-Saharan African countries, which were hardest hit by the AIDS pandemic. The SLF was created with the express purpose of supporting community-based organizations working on the front lines of the AIDS pandemic. And many of these grassroots organizations were originally formed by small groups of individuals responding to the crisis that AIDS had brought in their own lives and in the lives of their neighbors. So over the years, these organizations have developed into thriving local institutions with deep connections to their communities. The SLF's community-based partners are turning the tide of HIV and AIDS by providing care and support to women, to orphan children, to LGBTIQ individuals, to grandmothers, and to people living with HIV and AIDS. We trust and respect our partners to make the decisions that are best for their communities and provide flexible funding which can adapt to the situations and the needs that may arise. So of course, like here in Canada, all of our partners have been deeply affected by the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdowns and various restrictions that have been put in place. We know that people with HIV are especially vulnerable if their access to healthcare, to food, to hygiene, and peer support is compromised. So for example, in many of the communities where our partners work, food is often sourced at crowded markets, which makes accessing this basic need a very risky activity for those who are already vulnerable. So I'm just going to share a few examples of the ways in which our partners have been impacted and how they've adapted to these changes. So there's been a lot of limitations on movement and safety restrictions, which have had an immediate impact on grandmothers' ability to provide basic necessity for their families, for their grandchildren. School closures have impacted the children in their care. Accessing health services and continuity of care have been an urgent priority for our partners right now. So while restrictions are easing in some places and things are reopening, our partners are continuing to work with protective equipment, with masks, with social distancing, to ensure that the communities continue to have the support and services they need. So they've been providing home deliveries of medication, food assistance, including backyard and community gardens for clients. They're establishing hand washing stations in the community, offering virtual check-ins with clients by phone or text message to provide consultations and support safely. One organization has noted a noticeable incline in gender-based violence, so they started a hotline for those who are suffering. And just to explain what you're seeing on the screen here, the photo on the left is from one of our partners in South Africa, Hillcrest AIDS Center Trust. So here we see a staff member conducting a temperature check while checking in clients for a community meeting. The photo on the right is from an organization called Positive Living in Kenya. So they provide immediate needs as well as doing education and training for destigmatization in their communities. Here they're providing education for children affected by HIV and AIDS, as you can see in an outdoor distanced classroom with masks. A few more photos here. The photo on the left is from Nayaka AIDS Orphan Project in Uganda. And this is a counselor who's visiting students in their communities to provide them with direct support around sexual and reproductive rights, health and rights. On the right is from an organization called Katibu Mobile, which is also in Uganda. So both of these organizations have had to operate in pretty strict lockdown situations. When Uganda locked down, there was a ban on all public transport, all unnecessary, anything not deemed essential, any sort of transport. So they had to rent motorbikes so that they could reach their communities and pivot to do home deliveries of medication. And so as you can see there, that's what's going on in the photo. So I just wanted to share this quote that we received from one of our partners in Kenya. I'll just read it out. "We must now use our 10 years of experience in the fight against HIV to help shape the response to COVID. We've learned that a holistic approach is essential. Medical support must be complemented with broader social and economic supports so that vulnerable community members can access our services." And I just have a short video to share. So just in closing, I just want to say I echo all of the advocacy calls that Tim mentioned at the SLF. We agree that a holistic approach is the only way forward. And I want to thank Blooms for Africa and the First Unitarian Church for your support over the years for the SLF. We certainly do not take it for granted. So thank you so much.
Again, my thanks both to you, Tim, and to you, Ruth Ann, for bringing us your message. The reminders of what our efforts do and the meaning that they have in the community, and how we all individually and collectively can help keep things moving forward and keeping people safe, protected, educated, and treated during this time of chaos in the world and dealing with pandemics on the right of us and the left of us. So thank you for being with us this morning. As we prepare to close our service today, Doreen Knoll has our benediction words. Doreen?
A short story from a grandmother who belongs to Grandmothers Against Poverty and AIDS in Africa. I used to live in the dark. I couldn't turn on the light because my grandson hung himself from the only light in the middle of the room. Then, when I came here, when I heard the stories from everybody, it was like a revelation that it's not only me. You cannot stay a victim when you realize you are just one of many. Instead, you think we can do something together to make a change. Together we are powerful, not just one old granny. So I found my hands could start working. That is when I started laughing again, and I was happy.
The Lord is my shepherd, I have all I need. She makes me lie down in green meadows, beside the still waters she will lead. She restores my soul. She rights my wrongs. She leads me in the path of good things. She fills my heart with song.
forsake me. She has said she won't forsake me. I'm in her hands. Surely, surely goodness and kindness will follow me all the days of my life, and I will live in her house forever, forever and ever. Glory be to our Mother and Daughter and to the Holy of Holies, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world